Greetings, I'm your host, Dr. Wolfula, and when I'm not writing children's books about my son's whimsical adventures with his stuffed animals that will lead to him being bullied and traumatized for the rest of his life, I'm here at the Wolfula reviewing movies. In today's vid, I'll be covering a relatively new flick, Winnie-the-Pooh, Blood and Honey. Blood and Honey sounds really good right about now. But yeah, a Winnie-the-Pooh horror movie actually exists, because of course it does. But you might be wondering, why? And also, why now? Well, Winnie-the-Pooh's first book, written by A.A. Milne and published in 1926, entered the public domain in late 2021. So anybody can use Winnie-the-Pooh and most of his related characters in anything. You want to make a porno film called Winnie-the-Pooh's 100 Acres of Wood? You can legally do that. I mean, if I had my way, I would have you executed immediately without a funeral, but this is separate from copyright. Up until now, Disney, of course, held exclusive film and television rights to Winnie-the-Pooh before the character entered the public domain. The irony of this is, of course, that most of Disney's most popular characters are in the public domain, many of them fairy tales or children's books that are hundreds of years old. This is the source of Disney's evil power. They make an adaptation of a famous story they don't have to pay the rights for. Kids watch Disney's version of this classic story. Disney's version of an old fairy tale becomes the only version most people can ever accept, and any other adaptation of the story, even if it's more faithful, is met with hostility. It's how Disney has managed to have a monopoly on so many of your childhoods, and given them the capital to buy so many modern, beloved, copyrighted franchises like Marvel's superheroes, Star Wars, or even by competitors and their complete catalogs of films. It's honestly terrible how comprehensive Disney's hold on pop culture is at this point. They own nearly everything, and if they don't exclusively own something, they'll make sure their version is the one you see first as a kid, and that it'll be the only version you show to your kids. It's part of why Disney makes so many half-assed live-action remakes of their own animated films these days, so they can preemptively cut any potential competitors off at the fucking kneecaps. Disney knew full well that they were losing their exclusive rights to Winnie-the-Pooh before 2021, and made sure to get a live-action take of their own out there ahead of anyone else once Pooh finally went into the public domain. Christopher Robin, released in 2019, but Disney definitely didn't count on, the first non-Disney Winnie-the-Pooh movie being a live-action horror film. Which brings us to Winnie-the-Pooh, Blood and Honey, directed by Rhys Frake Waterfield, and if you can't tell based on his name, he's British. Waterfield, whose classic films up to this point were the Area 51 Incident, The Killing Tree, and Fire-Nado, only made a horror movie based on a cartoon bear named Pooh because he was the one guy who saw potential for a big payday purely from the novelty of having the first and maybe only Winnie-the-Pooh horror movie. It's no coincidence that months after Pooh Bear went public domain, they rushed to shoot this flick and hype it up in the media by touting the absurdity of its graphically violent premise surrounding a cartoon bear. So yeah, Winnie-the-Pooh Blood and Honey is an obvious cash grab, but is it at least a good cash grab? Well, let's just say that it's fitting that this movie has the word Pooh in its title. Here's my review of Winnie-the-Pooh Blood and Honey. But first, I have a message from my sponsor, me! Pledge to my Patreon today to support the channel, help it continue to grow, and you'll also get access to weekly movie nights every Sunday and archive commentaries if you miss the movie nights live. Just $5 a month to get a movie night every week. Pledge to patreon.com/Dr. Wolfula if you're interested, and I thank you in advance.
A young boy named Christopher Robin came across some most unusual adolescent creatures.
The cold open of Blood and Honey reimagines the Winnie-the-Pooh characters with an animated storybook sequence that's trying to recreate the style of E.H. Shepard's art, but you can honestly find better artwork than this scribbled in a 4th grader's composition book. The basic gist of this origin story is that Christopher Robin discovers and befriends some anthropomorphic animals in the 100 Acre Wood. So instead of Winnie-the-Pooh and his friends just being stuffed animals brought to life through imagination, it's implied that somebody went out in the woods, fucked a bunch of animals, and begat some human/animal hybrid freaks of nature.
Crossbreeds, who some would describe as abominations.
So it's already not really Winnie-the-Pooh. You could easily make a horror movie about killer stuffed animals, but no, that's not fucked up enough. There's gotta be a bestiality angle in the mix.
He brought them food, and with each passing day together, their bond strengthened and grew.
So anyway, Christopher Robin got along famously with Pooh, Piglet, and the other crimes against nature in the 100-Acre Wood. But eventually they needed to pull a Toy Story 3, and Christopher Robin had to go to college to become a doctor like me.
Eventually, Christopher had to make the hard decision to leave his friends to attend college, to become a doctor.
Leaving his forest friends behind to thrive. And by thrive, I mean starve and become forced to feed on Eeyore because the movie didn't have a budget for a donkey costume.
The trauma of this act warped the minds of the group.
This is where there's some serious disconnect between the movie's abstract intro and the actual narrative. The 100-Acre Wood is described as a desolate wasteland devoid of nourishment.
The nights were deathly cold, with the land barren and completely devoid of food.
But in live action, it's shown to be an actual forest the creatures could forage in. I mean, Winnie-the-Pooh and his friends had to have been eating something other than Eeyore for years, and before Christopher Robin came along. And for some reason, Pooh and his friends blame Christopher Robin for their consumption of Eeyore, but why?
Then developed a hatred to all things human, and in particular, Christopher Robin.
This villain origin story doesn't make any sense. It's almost as if this movie was written by a dumbass.
They renounced their humanity and returned to their animalistic roots.
5 years later, Christopher Robin finally returns to the 100-Acre Wood. Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Christopher Robin. Yeah, I guess he became a doctor in 5 years. Must be a real super genius. And Christopher is about to get married soon to, Mary here.
Because soon will be Christopher, Mary Robin.
Man, Christopher Robin in this movie really sounds a lot like Elmer Fudd.
I don't think you're crazy, Chris.
Who the fuck goes hiking in a smoking jacket anyway? Whatever, Christopher tries to convince his future wife that his friends in the forest were actually real.
Lots of people have imaginary friends as children.
They're not imaginary, Mary.
But things go terribly wrong when the couple arrives at the 100-Acre Wood, and it looks like total shit. Seriously, this is some of the worst production design I've ever seen. How do we make the 100-Acre Wood look scary? Make a shitty cardboard tombstone for Eeyore with a human skull on top of it that the characters choose to ignore because it all looks so terrible.
We're going home.
When Pooh returns home to take a nap, Chris and Mary try to avoid an awkward conversation by hiding for 12 hours. So where did Pooh get all these trailers from? Whatever, the couple tries to escape, but not before Piglet gives Mary a big hug, strangling her to death with a chain while the love of her life just asks the guy murdering her to please stop. Christopher Robin tries the same strategy out on Pooh here.
You need to help me, please. There's something wrong with Piglet. He just killed my wife.
But the silly old bear instead takes his old friend out back to show him what it's like. They didn't have the budget to show any of this, so it's shittily drawn instead. Like Tank Girl. You might be hoping that the movie ends here, but it actually keeps going when we meet Maria.
Go somewhere quiet. Disconnect from the busy world.
Who is urged by her shrink to spend some time out in the country after it's revealed that an old man has been stalking Maria and even tried to undress her while she was sleeping.
You are not in the same situation you were a few months ago.
Yeah.
You know, it's never really a good idea to introduce these realistically scary situations that women have to actually deal with in a movie about Winnie-the-Pooh killing people, but it's a choice, I guess. A fucking crazy choice, but still a choice.
The police found his computer and found loads of me. I had no idea.
Maria's backstory is the closest to being a character she or any of her friends get to be. I couldn't tell you any of the other characters' names. They barely interact with each other. And the closest to a personality any of these other characters gets to is Instagram thought.
Stop sitting around on Instagram all day.
I say this a lot, but it's especially the case here. This movie makes Friday the 13th characters look like multi-dimensional characters brimming with depth. It's like the director thought he was being deep by giving the main character a traumatic backstory, but nobody told him, you need to come up with a character besides that. It's such a cheap shortcut to try to garner some kind of sympathy from your audience. And the fact that this traumatic backstory is in the middle of a Winnie-the-Pooh movie kind of takes away from the trauma the character is enduring. Unfortunately for Maria, she's on her way to getting even more traumatized because the Airbnb she and her friends are staying at is in the 100-Acre Wood, and one of Maria's friends, Tina, discovers the horrors that wait in these woods after getting lost en route.
Can you call me as soon as you get this? Because I have no clue where I'm going.
Hey, isn't that Lindsay Lohan? Man, she appears in any movie if there's the slightest chance of getting crack. Tina has trouble getting a signal on her phone, so she decides to go deeper in the woods to get a better reception, and gets a warm welcome from Pooh Bear here. Wow, that fat fuck sure can run. Tina decides to run to the safety of a nearby scary building where she can easily be cornered, and she ends up in the grasp of Winnie-the-Pooh, who very necessarily rips Tina's shirt off, bashes her head in, and throws what's left of her into a wood chipper. Oh, this is reminding me I need to swing by Arby's later. This movie's making me hungry. So anyway, after Pooh does some BDSM shit on Christopher Robin, Maria and her friends back at the Airbnb end up in the murderous sights of Pooh Bear and Piglet, and things go even further downhill from here.
There's someone else outside.
Even by slasher movie standards, Winnie-the-Pooh Blood and Honey is really poorly shot and even more poorly written. It takes an ill-conceived premise like a Winnie-the-Pooh horror movie and manages to somehow fuck it up even further in every possible way. I guess for starters, Pooh and Piglet don't look anything like the characters they're supposed to be. They look more like Bebop and Rocksteady from Ninja Turtles. Piglet is closer to Pumbaa than Piglet, and Pooh himself looks like if Shrek was wearing a condom on his head. The movie tries to take itself as deadly seriously as possible by going as dark and edgy as it can get to try to transform the most benign children's characters imaginable into psychotic killers, but the results just look fucking goofy. How can anyone look at these costumes and try to make a serious horror movie with them? Anytime I just think of these costumes, I laugh. Blood and Honey is supposed to be a fucked up and gritty movie. When they abduct the Instagram girl in her bikini and tie her up, it's supposed to be this horrifyingly brutal scene where her head gets crushed by a car, but come on, it's being carried out by a guy wearing a crudely made Winnie-the-Pooh costume. Savage as fuck? I don't feel anything watching this except astonishment that somebody wanted to shoot this in the first place. The only aspect that Blood and Honey does kind of well is the gore, because otherwise it's completely inept as a slasher movie. There's very little in the way of any attempt at suspense, trying to surprise the audience. Pooh and Piglet make their presence known to the audience at all times, and the script falls into the trap of revealing the killers too early to the victims, because when all the characters know there are killers around right away, it becomes harder to put the characters into situations where they can actually die without making the characters ultra dumb. And guess what? Blood and Honey makes the characters ultra dumb so they can get killed. The movie tries to make the characters seem competent by having them go get a ridiculously large gun right away, which the director got with the deluxe edition of BioShock Infinite, but the main characters never use the guns to defend themselves or even fire it. Instead, the girls spend like 20 minutes splitting up and sneaking around so Pooh and Piglet can kill and abduct the girls more easily. The way the main characters are written is just embarrassing and outdated. If A.A. Milne wasn't cremated, he'd be spitting in his grave right now.
What was that?
The only excuse the movie can come up with for why the characters aren't trying to escape or even calling the cops is because they need to rescue strangers held captive by Pooh and Piglet. Christopher Robin, for one, who doesn't go with them immediately so he can be a Deus Ex Machina later.
But there isn't any time, just go!
And some random broad who is never seen until now, who's been getting tortured the entire time.
What happened to you? To Pooh, Piglet.
And ends up taking the gun so she can have a cringe as fuck showdown with Piglet. The cringe doesn't stop there either. The surviving pair encounters a group of whatever the British equivalent of rednecks are.
Some kind of freak picking on them girls, huh?
And instead of these blokes driving the girls to safety, the foursome decides to take on the bear cosplaying as a lumberjack. And Pooh effortlessly kicks their asses and is even shown killing one of the guys with CGI bees. Pooh Bear's ability to control bees is not established anywhere else in the movie before this point. It's just a thing he can do, I guess. The director thought it was cool when he was writing it. Alright, I'm gonna be spoiling the end of Winnie-the-Pooh Blood and Honey. If you actually care, skip to this time code, I guess. Once the British rednecks are all dead, Pooh Bear decapitates, I don't know, the girl who wore glasses in the movie. And intends to kill Maria next, but Christopher Robin mows his old pal Pooh down with a Deus Ex Machina car and saves the day.
It's okay. Okay? It's over.
But because this is a dark Winnie-the-Pooh movie, there can't be any happy endings. Pooh survives, and the silly old bear gets back to silly old killing Maria like before. Third time's the charm, though, so Christopher Robin pleads to Pooh not to kill Maria.
The good is still in there. Pooh.
To go back to being the good bear he once knew, and Pooh has a sudden change of heart. Psych! Pooh slits Maria's throat, and Christopher Robin heroically runs away as Pooh mindlessly desecrates Maria's body. Maria won't have to worry about anybody stalking her in hell. Yes, the movie ends there, and the credits make sure to let us know that Winnie the Pooh will return in a sequel. I can't wait! Actually, I can wait. I can wait forever for the sequel to this movie. Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey is a cheap cash grab, and they for sure grab the cash. Something of this film's caliber would be lucky to end up streaming on Amazon Prime, but because of the viral novelty behind the film's ridiculous concept, it managed to have enough cachet to actually get released in theaters, and made $5 million on a budget that was less than 100 grand. The makers of this film made more than 50 times their budget on a movie that's a glorified meme. Something Megan, another meme movie released this year, definitely couldn't claim itself. But Blood and Honey doesn't play into the meme behind its idea to make a film that could be genuinely fun, and it doesn't make creative use of the classic characters it turns into monsters. This could be any other slasher movie, it just happens to have a guy vaguely dressed as Winnie the Pooh in it. It's as lazy as you can get. They don't even have Pooh get stuck in a hole, for God's sake.
What the fuck?
The worst thing about this movie's modest success is that the director intends to become the Walt Disney of horror movies, making more horror films based on public domain children's books like Peter Pan and Bambi, with the same exact premise as this Winnie the Pooh horror flick. What if they killed people? The difference between the director of Blood and Honey and Disney, though, is that while Disney's business practices are horrible, the imagination and craftsmanship of the actual creators under its banner created masterpieces that pushed the medium of animation forward. The only thing this movie manages to push forward is the idea that if you make a shitty movie with novelty factor behind it, you can make millions of dollars. But really, the lesson to take from Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey is that Winnie the Pooh is public domain, and that means you can make your own Winnie the Pooh horror movie. Nobody can stop you. If you want to make a Winnie the Pooh horror movie, I urge you to make a better, more creative film than what we're stuck with right now, so we don't end up with a guy trying to have a monopoly on horror versions of public domain children's stories, so the output of this director becomes completely irrelevant like when he was making Fire-Nado. I'd give Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey 1 wood out of 100 acres of wood. Honestly, The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh was a scarier version of Pooh Bear than this movie. That show scared the shit out of me.
You're gonna pay for what you did, you fucking freak!
While I still have your attention, give my zombie servant Goulash of the Gulag channel a subscribe. He's back and has finished off reviewing the Addams Family franchise, and we'll be moving on to reviewing the live-action Scooby-Doo prequel movies. Subscribe to the Gulag today. I command it. This video is made possible through the pledges of my Patreon supporters, and I'd like to give a very special thanks to the kind folks pledged to my shoutouts tier. All of the support on Patreon means a lot to me, and it helps my dark influence continue to grow. If you like this video, like it, and if you loved it, click the subscribe and bell buttons for more vids. Be sure to also keep in touch by following me on social media at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Dr. Wolfula. While I still have your attention, consider pledging to my Patreon to support the channel and get bonus content like previews, VIP Discord server access, private movie night streams, and credits in videos. Consider pledging at patreon.com/Dr. Wolfula. Also, check out official Dr. Wolfula t-shirts and other merch on tpublic.com/user/Dr. Wolfula. Thanks for watching. See you all next time. Dr. Wolfula signing out.